Hey everyone, how's it going out there? So I decided to do a video on my year-long deployment to Afghanistan. Now, that's a 365-day deployment. I was in the city of Kabul for 1 year. During that year, they let you do one vacation home. Other than that, I was in Afghanistan the entire time. I want to do a video on my experience in Afghanistan and the deployment process in general. So I'm going to break this up into a few different parts. First off, I'm going to talk about the notification the Air Force gives you, how the deployment usually works for those of you who may be deployed in the Air Force in the future, like what kind of time frame you're looking at for deployment. I know it's probably changed a bit, but I'm sure it's mostly the same. So we have the notification that you're going to be deployed. There's some training that goes on. I did lots of training prior to going to Afghanistan, so I'll talk about that training. I'll talk about the travel, how I got there, the different planes I took, the different aircraft I took to get there. I'll talk about the actual deployment and what I did there. And then finally, I'll talk about my R&R and returning back home. So let's start with the notification. Typically, the Air Force will try to give you 4 to 6 months advance notification, especially on a really long deployment, like a 365-day deployment. That way, you have time to get all your required training done, get your immunizations done, and all that sort of thing. I was notified 6 months prior to departure that I've been selected for this deployment. It doesn't always work out like that. Sometimes someone will be selected for deployment, they'll start going through some of the stages and phases, and something might happen and they can't go anymore. And then someone will have to do a very short notice fill for that. When you get notified that you have to be going on a deployment, what are your options? Well, there are a few different options. Not all of them are available to you necessarily. There's this thing called a reclama. So a reclama means that, say, your squadron commander or whoever needs you in that position and they cannot do the mission without you. You're the only person who can do this job. There's no backup, no backfill, and you need to do this job. So the colonel, lieutenant colonel, whoever will say, no, I need this person to stay here and do this mission here stateside, or wherever their base is. So they can't go on deployment. And so then they go to the next person in line. But that's pretty rare for that to happen. Next thing you can do is say, well, I don't want to go on deployment. So look at your situation. Are you able to retire? Are you able to separate from the Air Force? Then that's a choice that you have to make too. If you have your active duty service commitment is completely clear, then you can separate because you don't want to go on deployment. That's possible as well. Now, barring those two things, your third option is to, of course, accept the tasking and go on your deployment. When you accept your tasking and you go on deployment, they're going to have a certain number of trainings for you to do. In my situation, the first training I had to do was called ECAC, it stands for Evade and Conduct After Capture. This is only a 4-day training, and it was in San Antonio when I took it. Not sure it's still going to be there, but that's where it was when I took it. It was in Lackland, 4 days. It was, I think it was a Monday through Thursday sort of a thing. Anyway, it's like your SEER school, but condensed down to only 4 days. They basically teach you how to act in the off chance that you will be captured by somebody. You need to be able to recognize who's capturing you if you are captured, and you need to know how you're supposed to react to that. So if it's another country that's capturing you, or if it's a terrorist, people taking ransom, that sort of thing, a rogue sort of an operation, you're going to act a little bit differently depending on who has captured you. So that's what they teach you there. They teach you some resistance techniques so you can resist some of the questioning and some of the interrogations you might have, and what to say when they ask you these questions. And they give you some tips on how to escape captivity as well. So it's pretty short training. Don't really want to go into too much detail on that in case you're going to go to that. I don't want to spoil anything. But that's ECAC, Evade and Conduct After Capture. My next big training was at Fort Dix, McGuire Air Force Base, Fort Dix. That's sort of a joint base. The training that we did there was actually pretty long. I believe it was about 5 weeks. And it was called Fieldcraft. What Fieldcraft means is your typical Air Force guy or gal isn't really that familiar with a weapon like M4 and the M9, which is what we're qualified on. We don't know about kind of group tactics, driving Humvees, what to do when we're in contact with the enemy and things like that. That's kind of like Army stuff in general. So being in the Air Force, we don't really deal with that on a day-to-day basis. So they want this to get us up to speed and those sort of skills. We did Fieldcraft Hostile was what I did, because I was going to a hostile area. You might go Fieldcraft Non-Hostile if you're going to a non-hostile area, but I was going to a hostile area. So I did Fieldcraft Hostile, which was 2 weeks. Each day we did something different than the day before. One day we would do group tactics, where we're just kind of patrolling. One day we would do cross-loading vehicles. If a vehicle gets attacked, you got to cross-load into another vehicle. That's like mounted ops, I think. We did self-protection, where we learned some hand-to-hand combat skills. We spent a day on the range, just shooting a bunch of bullets, different kind of scenarios of shooting, and that sort of thing. That went on for about 2 weeks. After that, we did Fieldcraft CENTCOM, which was kind of fun. That was a 1 week sort of a thing. And in that, we did some evasive driving. And actually, the whole training was kind of fun. We were assigned a weapon at the beginning, and we needed to keep that weapon secure. We had to lock it up every day, or if we were going to go anywhere without it, we needed to lock it up before we did that. And so that was the third week. So Fieldcraft Hostile was 2 weeks. Fieldcraft CENTCOM was 1 week, and then we had our Air Advisor Academy, which was 2 weeks. Now, I was in a role as an Air Advisor, which is why I had to do the Air Advisor Academy. I was going to Afghanistan, so I had to learn some Dari, I had to learn some culture, learn about the different ways people might be acting in Afghanistan that's different than I would be accustomed to here in the US. And it's all about being sensitive to other people's cultures. You don't want to offend people. You're trying to have a good relationship with them, good rapport, so you don't want to offend them by doing something that you don't know is offensive, but it is. And we learn a few phrases in Dari. Not that I can actually hold a conversation in Dari, but that's one of the languages that we learned. Really great training there. Our teacher for Dari was an Afghan national who had moved to the US. And so he was really good at teaching us. So that was pretty good. Dari is a language that's most similar to Farsi, is what they told me. I don't really know Farsi. I know very little Dari, but they said that Dari and Farsi are closely related, more closely related than like Arabic and Dari. Dari is closer to Farsi than it is to Arabic. And then there's also Pashto. And Pashto, I believe, is more similar to Arabic. So you have Arabic and Pashto are kind of similar, and then Dari and Farsi are kind of similar. And Farsi is what they speak in Iran. All right, so after we did all that, I went back to my base and just got ready to depart to go to Afghanistan. So I don't have a lot of pictures of my training time prior to leaving for deployment. I do have a few. This one right here is the culminating exercise at the end of Fieldcraft Hostile, where we use all of our skills from the previous 2 weeks into a big exercise where we're in a Humvee, we're getting attacked by bad guys, and we need to defend it. We have to go and clear buildings and get hostages out, things like that. So it was kind of a fun exercise, and at the end of it, we got to shoot off all of our sim rounds into the woods because they didn't want to take them back. This is kind of the gear that we were wearing. We were issued OCPs, which was new at the time. I had my ABUs, my old school Air Force ABUs, but I did end up getting OCPs, of course, before I left. And OCPs have cool things like combat shirts. Well, I guess the ABUs have combat shirts too, but this is a guy in a combat shirt there. So we did learn a lot of first aid, like on the spot, medical type stuff that you need to do to get someone out of the area so they can get to a hospital and get some actual medical attention. It was called TCCC, which stands for Tactical Combat Casualty Care. Tactical Combat Casualty Care. The majority of TCCC is finding out what's bleeding, getting a tourniquet on it, and then getting them out of there. And that way they can be cared for by an actual medical professional when the evac comes in. So that's the majority of that. And so we had lots of different exercises for that. We did different kind of carries. And this picture here is a man who is well over around 300 pounds, I think, and it showed that even at 300 pounds, there's a carry that you can do to get that person moved, even if you're not that big. And this picture here is an exercise of using our TCCC skills. They have all these kind of like rubber moulage type injuries that you would strap on to your leg or your arm or your eye or your head or whatever. And one team has just been attacked, so they got all these fake injuries, and the other team will come in really quick. It's like a haze. It's got some smoke. It's simulating an actual combat event, and we find somebody, and you're like, "Are you okay? What's going on with you? Are they responsive?" Slap that tourniquet on them, and then drag them out of there to the exit. So that's what that exercise was there.